Hi, everyone. And the bigger clinical question to me is when are we supposed to help a client hit that stage of acceptance? My colleague, a talented clinician and venerated rabbinic personage and teacher in his own right, was in the middle of his presentation of one of his tougher cases. Without getting you too lost in the details, his client was having difficulty in a familial relationship and was distressed. The client's goal was to find calm, and my colleague mused about whether the client was really looking for acceptance of his situation and when and how to help a client get to that acceptance. Now, the truth is, psychological thought praises acceptance. After all, it's the last and seemingly the ultimate stage of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And when the suffering, the loss of a relationship, even a breakup or loss of a job or of colleagues, the traumatic shattering is considered restored when the sufferer learns to achieve acceptance, often being told inappropriately, you just have to accept it. And even pain and suffering of a physical nature is often treated by working with the pain sufferer on accepting the pain. And then there's the famous Serenity Prayer, the hallmark of all 12-step programs, where participants regularly pray to Hashem that he provide them the serenity to accept myself as I am. So yes, it seems to my colleague that acceptance is a big theme and a goal in psychological work. And as for me, sitting and listening, I immediately thanked him for the word before Shabbos. When he raised his questioning eyebrows, I told him, as I'd often do to you each week, let me explain. You see, in Parashas Vayeishev, we find two individuals who suffer losses, Yehuda and Yaakov. Yehuda marries the daughter of Shua, has 3 children, and loses 2 of them. Thereafter, his wife Bashua passes as well. The Torah tells us of his mental state at the time. We're told, Vayinachem Yehuda, Yehuda was consoled, and he went on with life. And ultimately, the episode with Tamar that birthed the Davidic line. However, Yaakov too experiences a loss. He's led to believe that his beloved son, the one that he sent to check on his brothers, has been in a terrible accident and was devoured by a wild animal. Yaakov engages the required mourning practices. He tears his clothing and sits Shiva. His beloved family tries to console him. But unlike Yehuda, who achieved consolation, Vayima'in lehisnachem, Yaakov refuses to be consoled. Now, how is it that Yehuda was able to achieve consolation and Yaakov was not? If Yaakov's refusal was proper, why did Yehuda not learn from it and resist himself? And in truth, by the way, the Gemara chastises the one who refuses to be consoled and mourns excessively. It's as if he or she is trying to show more mercy than Hashem himself, the Gemara says. So how then does Yaakov allow himself not to be consoled? How can he refuse? But in truth, the concept of nechama, of consolation, is a difficult one for me to grasp in total. As we noted before in regard to psychological thought, Jewish thought also demonstrates that nechama is something positive and desirous. After the sin with the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, Moshe davens on behalf of the people, and we're told, Vayinachem Hashem al hara'ah, Hashem was consoled about the punishment he planned on inflicting on his people. And when walking on the ramparts of Yerushalayim and seeing a fox running in the place known as the Kodesh HaKadashim, the Holy of Holies, the rabbis walking were quite distressed and depressed. That is, of course, until Rabbi Akiva offered them a hope that made him laugh. They responded at the end, Akiva nichamtanu, Rabbi Akiva, you consoled us. Again, nechama seems to be a desired goal to a tough time. And who could forget the words of the Navi Yeshayahu, who begins the Haftorah sections after Tisha B'Av with the call, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, be consoled, my nation. Yes, Nachama is something we seek in our Torah life in the same way we see it as a goal in our emotional one. Nechama sounds like a good thing, wouldn't you agree? And yet not all Nechama is the same. Remember, the first Nechama in the Torah was not so positive. After watching the world deteriorate, Hashem becomes sad, so to speak, with the state of affairs in the world. He responds as we do in the Torah, Vayinachem Hashem ki asas ha'adam ba'aretz. Hashem was consoled for having made man in the world. And here the Nechama was going to lead to the almost complete shutdown of the Making a World and Man project. The Nechama would foster and motivate destruction. Is that supposed to be a good thing? And when is Nechama a good thing that we should accept, and when is it not? When do we grow from Nechama, and when is it a dangerous force? When are we more Yehuda Nechama accepting, and when more Yaakov-like and refuse to accept consolation? I believe we often misunderstand Nechama as referring to giving comfort and consolation. It doesn't. It couldn't. Take poor Yaakov, for instance. Even with the rest of his incredible family surrounding him, children and children-in-law, who all came rushing over to remind him of all the good things he had to hold on to in life, Yaakov refused. Why would he be so stubborn? Let him go through the grief and find the comfort on the other side. Unless, of course, Nechama refers not to comfort and consolation, but as we said before, perhaps to acceptance. When one can achieve Nechama, it happens. When we can accept our situation. And in those cases, Nechama is the vehicle for change. But there are times when acceptance is just not the right way to go. And in those moments, it's resistance that will bring about the change. The tension between acceptance and resistance is one of the most profound dilemmas in human psychology and philosophy. And at its core, the goal is not to choose one over the other all the time. The trick, of course, is to develop, as they say in the Serenity Prayer, the wisdom to know the difference. Acceptance is ideal when a situation is unchangeable, it's already in the past, or governed by law outside of your control. And in these situations, in these cases, resistance doesn't change the outcome. It only adds a layer of suffering on top of the pain. When considering the destruction of the world as Hashem did at the time of the Mabul, the Great Flood, or after the destruction of the city of Yerushalayim and the exile of its inhabitants, the situation was unchangeable, and the course of destruction inevitable. And so at those moments, acceptance, Nechama, allowed for a paradigm shift in the thinking from mourning to a new dawn and morning. In fact, the Abarbanel explains that this is what happened at the time of the Churban, of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash as well. Hashem wanted the people to seek Nechama, to seek acceptance that he was still going to be watching his people, albeit differently. And when losing a relationship or a past that now needs to be rethought and considered, Nechama acceptance allows one to take stock of where he or she is and to focus on what one can impact in a different and even better way. And that's what happened with Yehuda. His wife passed. He needed to go on. And by developing acceptance, he was able to move forward. Even misgivings about mistakes in the past provide us with a place for Nechama as acceptance. So, and the Rambam makes it clear. So yeah, you can't unsend a text or unmake a choice from 5 years ago. But Nechama acceptance turns a shame spiral into a learning opportunity. However, one should not and cannot accept things that he or she has the power to change, because doing so is taking acceptance and using it as a mask for a learned helplessness. Ramban comments that in Yush b'davash so there's no room for giving up hope on things that are within your domain. Yaakov understood this. Somehow, somewhere in the depths of his essence, he knew that he was to be the one who was to be mitaso shlema. His mission was to be the one with a completely dedicated family. He didn't banish Reuven in the past from the Jewish nation despite Reuven's sin. And when he heard, he redoubled his efforts and made sure that his family, the future nation, was to remain 12, to remain complete. Despite his frustration and embarrassment when Shimon and Levi took matters into their own hands, Yaakov doesn't kick them out of the nation. He maintains them within the camp. And so when the words come forth that Yosef was gone and his progeny would not be complete, Yaakov resistance. It wasn't to be. It couldn't be. To Yaakov, this was an attack on his very essence. And so he resisted acceptance. If you bring your resistance to zero in a situation you can't change, your suffering may drop also to zero, even if the pain remains. However, if the situation can be changed, your resistance acts as the fuel for action. The only question we have to ask ourselves is how are we to know when to accept and when to resist? You know what a good litmus test for that might be? It might be when we learn to ask ourselves, if I accept this exactly as it is right now, does it empower me to take a better next step, or does it cause me to abandon my own values? If it's the former, please accept. And if we're losing ourselves, as Yaakov thought he was, then it might be time to consider continuing to resist. In U.S. history, the role of resistance in civil rights was highlighted by the courageous Rosa Parks. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Mrs. Parks, a seamstress, refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus to a white passenger, violating local laws and leading to her arrest. And when the bus driver ordered Rosa Parks to give up her seat, she understood that the law was unjust. But she also understood the moment. If I accept this command, I accept the lie that I'm worthless. Her quiet refusal was not anger, and it wasn't impulse. It was a clear moral calculation. Acceptance would have violated her dignity. Resistance protected it and changed history. Her courageous act of defiance sparked the 381-day Montgomery bus boycott, a major civil rights protest that ended segregation on public buses. Our own history also notes the importance of not compromising our values and resisting when they're challenged. We need look no further than Hanukkah itself, when one young woman, the daughter of Matisyahu Cohen Gadol, stood up and resisted a debasement in front of the Greco-Syrian governor. She refused Nechama acceptance because, again, acceptance would have violated her dignity. Similarly, Matisyahu's refusal to offer an offering to a pagan god in Modi'in also served as an immediate catalyst for what would become the Hanukkah battle and the Hanukkah miracle. Accepting these decrees designed to Hellenize the Jews would have destroyed Jewish identity and authenticity. Resistance was the thing that protected it and changed history. Life will hand each of us moments of heartbreak, disappointment, and uncertainty. Modern psychology often responds with the antidote of fostering acceptance. However, acceptance is helpful only when it elevates us. When my acceptance helps me grow, move forward, learn, forgive, rebuild or release, like it did for Yehuda and Rabbi Akiva, then it's healthy nechama. But when acceptance asks me to shrink, to compromise my values, to surrender my essence, then the Torah says resist. And both acceptance and resistance can also be forms of emunah. Yehuda's acceptance was emunah. Hashem nasan, Hashem lakach, Hashem took. But Hashem also is guiding me forward. At the same time, Yaakov's refusal was also emunah. Hashem promised me 12 shvatim, and I will not give up on his promise. And the same is true in our lives as well. When acceptance helps us trust Hashem, it's emunah. When resistance helps us hold on to Hashem, it's also emunah. Our method of discernment is learning to ask the question, is Hashem calling me to make peace with this reality, or is he calling me to stand up and to reshape it? When we figure out that answer, we'll know the answer, and we will also be able to do, as they did then, V'kavu shmona simei Chanukah elu lahodosu lahaleh l'shimcha gadol. Listen to the messages, and from within those messages, we will achieve that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us, and that which will lead us to sing forevermore, Hallel Hagadol. Wishing you and yours a Chanukah Sameach and a Shabbat Shalom to all.